In this video we're going to create a mono version of this rather busy and unfocused colour shot to create something much more striking and dramatic, and that involves cropping the shot, blurring it, playing with levels, creating layer masks to make it a selective blur, and creating a vignette effect as well. So there's a lot to get through. Let's get cracking. So let's kick off by looking at composition, and let's improve it using the crop tool, which we can select by clicking here or by pressing C. And also I'm just going to pull this out so it's floating. Then I can pop it wherever I like and keep it close to hand as well. Now go up to the options bar, and because we're on the crop tool, it's showing us all the options relating to that particular tool, and make sure you've got no restriction. So you can then choose any aspect ratio at all to suit the composition that you want to end up with. And just go to the left of the lamppost there, so that or just to the right, sorry, so we lose that lamppost, and hit return or click the tick to crop the image. Okay, there's the image cropped. So I'm just going to hit the tab button to get my layers palette back up. It's quite good to use tab to show and hide floating palettes so you can get rid of them when you need to. And let's duplicate this layer by dragging it to the create new layer icon. And then we can open up the layers palette so we can see both at once. If you find that it's a bit of a clutter, you can shrink the thumbnail size by going to more, palette options, and then choose a slightly smaller thumbnail, which is probably better for this particular size of image. So what we'll do now is create a blur effect so that we can actually have a selective focus effect by faking it with filters. So go to this layer here, make sure it's targeted. In fact, it helps if we label it so we know what it is later on. Call it blur, and then go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And that gives us a nice soft blur effect that we can actually use to create a shallow depth of field effect and actually make it look like we've got selective focus. Let's just have a look at a sign there, maybe this wasabi sign. Let's just increase the blur a little bit more to something like 6.2. It's a little bit more dramatic. And Control Plus will zoom in the background picture as well so we can see the blur effect there. I think I'm going to go even further, up to maybe about 7.3. Click OK once you're happy, and then you have a blurred layer on top of your original unblurred background layer. And what we'll do next is create a layer mask to blend the two together. And layer masks don't actually exist officially in Photoshop Elements. You have to pay more money to get hold of those, but we can fake one by using adjustment layers. Okay, let's create that layer mask. First thing to do is to click on a new adjustment layer and choose anyone, absolutely anyone, because we're not actually using the levels or the brightness contrast controls. We're just using the mask that comes with the adjustment layer to create our layer mask. So just click OK, don't adjust any of the sliders, and there you have your levels adjustment layer. Now pop that below the layer that you want to attach it to, the blur layer, and then move in between the two and hold down the Alt key, and you get this little icon appear like so. Click, and they're now linked and attached to each other so that whatever you do to this mask will affect the content of this layer. Let me demonstrate how layer masks work. Let me just select the brush tool. You don't need to do this, I'm just showing you something very quickly. Make sure we've got a black foreground colour. Target the mask. And then if I click now with a black, you can see that the girl is becoming visible because I'm literally poking a hole through this blurred layer to the layer below. So black basically makes a transparent hole in your layer by applying it to the mask. It's quite a cool effect because you can then show and hide whatever you like. But what we'll do, if I hit Ctrl Z a couple of times to undo those two brush strokes, is use a different tool to draw on the mask, and that's the gradient tool. So click to select the gradient tool. Make sure it's a default foreground to background gradient. If it's not, click on the gradient editor and choose this preset here. But you'll probably be fine. It should be default foreground to background. The other thing we want is a linear gradient, so tick this icon here and then go to the mask. And what we can do now is draw from top to bottom. Let me just Control minus to zoom out to create a gradient that starts off black and therefore makes a hole down here, but then gently blurs up to the top of the image. Let me just demonstrate that. If I just click and hold freehand, then it draws a diagonal line, but if I hold the Shift key down, then I get a nice straight line. And if I stop about here, then if we just zoom in now, you'll see that it starts off sharp because of the black and goes through to blur. Now we're losing the top of the girl's face, so I'm just going to redraw that gradient and go a little higher. And now we've got the girl showing up more. I'll do it one more time. There we go. So she's visible now, but it's blurring as we near the top of the image, so you get this nice selective focus effect.